morning, everyone. Welcome to the 2021 Counselor Conference, Counseling Students for Future Careers. Thank you for being with us this morning. Next slide, please. Thank you. I'm Deneen Brown. I'm the Regional Chair for the San Diego and Imperial Counties Community Colleges Regional Consortium, and we are so excited to be hosting our 6th annual Counselor Conference. Our first Counselor Conference had around 250 attendees, and this year we are so excited to announce that we have over 500 registered. We are so pleased to welcome counselors, administrators, educators from middle school, high school, adult education, non-credit, and community college. We are hoping that over the next 2 days, you'll expand your understanding of local career education pathways and counseling practices. But before we get started, I'd just like to highlight the importance of career education. Middle skill jobs, which are also referred to as community college level jobs, are positions that require more than a high school diploma, but less than a 4-year degree. These jobs earn an hourly average wage of $26.70, or a little over $55,000 annually. The region acknowledges that in order to get our students into these middle skill jobs, they need to have an awareness of the career pathways that exist in the community colleges, an understanding of how to align their interests, skills, and abilities with the variety of career options that are available in our economy, an infrastructure of interconnected support systems to help them along their journey, and an ample work-based learning and employment opportunities to directly link them to employers. Again, thank you for joining us today, and a very special thank you to the Planning Committee, our industry partners, the presenters, the student panelists, the exhibitors, and all of the volunteers who have made this event possible, and most importantly, you, our attendees. Before we introduce our key speaker, I invite Heather Cavazos, our Career Pathways Coordinators for the Regional Consortium, to review a few key housekeeping items. Heather?
Thank you, Deneen, and welcome everybody. Good morning. And I just want to say thank you to our Regional Consortium team. It does take a village to put on a regional conference, so we're so happy to be here with you today. Our team, Molly Ash, Suzanne Sebring, Kevin McMacken, Chris Yerkes, Leslie Wisdom, and the magic behind the scenes, and my partner in crime, Monica Rosas. Thank you, regional team, for helping put this conference together. So this is our virtual conference agenda over the next 2 days. We know you're busy with students while you continue to navigate during these challenging times. So we do thank you for your time these next 2 days. Day 1 will include our keynote speaker, followed by 2 sessions of breakouts, and we'll have pauses in between. So each session has 7 breakouts to choose from, for a total of 28 breakouts. Day 2 will begin with another amazing keynote speaker, followed by 2 more sessions of 7 breakouts to choose from. So lots of things to choose from. You have plenty of topics to peruse and enjoy. All breakouts will be recorded, and that recording will be available for viewing shortly after the conference. Also, all breakout presentation materials will be available in Whova to access after the conference. Don't forget to check out the community college career education videos during your 30-minute breaks. In your Whova website, you'll be able to navigate the conference with your left-hand pane. By clicking the date at the top, you'll be able to view and join breakouts. And for easy access for the breakouts, we highly suggest that you use your Chrome browser. In the community section, be on the lookout for conference announcements. You can ask questions or network with others, and you can see that community section in your left-hand navigation. Next slide. And then on your breaks, be sure to check out the exhibitors, where you can view the career education videos from all 10 colleges. So if you scroll down in Whova, you'll see all 10 colleges there in the San Diego and Imperial region. And those are professional videos created by each college to highlight their career education programs. All conference materials, including, yes, the 2022 Career Education Guide is here, and it's posted, as well as the priority sector handouts. They are available in the document section on the left-hand side. Right now, they're in English, and we'll also have them available soon in Spanish and Arabic. This is also in the document section where you'll be able to find all the breakout presentations and handouts, in addition to in your session view. So they're all there for you to access, and if they're not there yet, trust us, they'll be there soon. We'll be updating this section as we receive the materials from presenters, so check back often. If you would like to receive professionally printed color copies of the Career Education Guide and the Priority Sector handouts, which we will update every 2 years, you'll find that link on the Whova homepage, where you'll scroll down and click on the link to enter your request. Again, on the homepage of Whova, scroll down and you'll see a Google Doc where you can click on the link to request that those be delivered to your district or campus location. We'll do our best to do this in the spring, and we'll follow the COVID guidelines at your campus. Lastly, if you're having trouble accessing your breakout Zoom or anything else, Christopher Yerkes, part of our regional team, is behind the scenes providing tech support, so you can visit the Whova homepage to access this assistance link. He will have this open the entire time, so if you ever need anything, please click into that link. And now I'll turn it over to Deneen to introduce our keynote speaker.
Thank you, Heather. Now I'd like to introduce our keynote, Tina Ngo Bartel. Tina is the Director of the Center of Excellence for Labor Market Research. She oversees our regional research projects for the 10 San Diego and Imperial Counties community colleges. Her research includes job market analyses, employer surveys, and program evaluation studies. With nearly a decade of research and project management experience, Tina has brought in more than $20 million in grants over the course of her career. As a new mom, Tina is tackling her newest research project, which is deciphering a 5-month-old baby girl. Tina is also a project management professional and an educational leadership doctoral candidate in the joint UC San Diego and CSU San Marcos program. Tina, I hand it over to you.
Great, thanks, Deneen. So I'm going to share my screen with everyone. Let's hope this works out. Here you go. All right, everyone. So before I get started on my talk this morning, I want to take a moment for all of us to take a deep breath and acknowledge that there were a lot of challenges in the past couple of years. Like many of you, I experienced loss and joy since March of 2020. I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl this year, and within a couple of weeks, I lost my best friend. This experience made me stop and think about what's really important to me and what work-life balance really means. This type of reflection is part of the driving force behind what is going on now in the economy, which is called the Great Resignation. You might have heard this term quite a bit. Many news outlets have reported on this phenomenon, including the Harvard Business Journal, Forbes, NPR, and many others. Essentially, business workers are quitting their jobs at an all-time high. Last month, the Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that 4.4 million people, or 3% of the entire workforce, quit their jobs in September. At the same time, in earlier years, the quit rate was 2.3% in 2005 and 2.1% in 2001. To explain the Great Resignation, people anecdotally blamed the unemployment benefits. Because people are on unemployment, they're not going after jobs. Well, there's been a lot of research about that to confirm whether or not that anecdote was true. And according to researchers, it's shown that states that ended their COVID-related benefits early did not actually see an increase in employment compared to other states that actually continued their benefits. So rather than blaming unemployment benefits, let's just look at labor market forces at play to see why people are quitting in such huge numbers. A few things include pandemic burnout, a labor shortage, and a collective reassessment about priorities and what matters to people like myself, that same collection or same recollection or reflection, excuse me. Stories like this one from the New York Times are not uncommon. So the man highlighted in this article reported that his decision to leave his job was accumulation of months of perceived injustices. He said that he was able to evaluate what was going on in the workplace more clearly because of the pandemic. When the coronavirus swelled in the fall, he asked to work from home to reduce the risk of exposure because he was afraid that he would expose his sister, who was immune system compromised. And his request to work from home was denied. And that reinforced his decision that he wanted to quit from that company. He saw that he was not respected or valued. This kind of reflection, this kind of quitting happened to many people that found their workplaces not valuing them. He is now currently looking for work, and he, even though he didn't find a job, he still ended up quitting and is still currently looking for work. A lot of times, employers, when they don't value their employees, sometimes in the past, folks would continue to go along and continue working because they had to make ends meet. We realized that during pre-pandemic times, a lot of people worked despite low wages. So I don't know if everybody remembers what happened before March of 2020 when the shutdown happened, but we were in a pretty good spot for unemployment rates and jobs. In the news, various outlets reported that unemployment fell down to 3.6%. It was the lowest that has been in over 50 years. The national unemployment rate hovered around 3.5%. We were around that percentage in San Diego County, and economists described the situation as full employment. However, despite job growth before the pandemic, wages did not increase. So when we looked at wages and looked at how employers were treating some of the workers 2 months before the stay-at-home order in California, the Brookings Institution found that 53 million workers across the US barely earned enough to live on. Their median earnings were $10.22 per hour, which is about $18,000 per year. These low-wage workers were employed as retail sales workers, cooks, food and beverage servers, janitors, personal care workers, including childcare workers and patient care assistants. So even though we had full employment, everybody was working around the clock, wages were not keeping up. For years, wages did not keep up with the rise in cost of living. So again, before the pandemic hit, we were at full employment, but our wage growth was really low. And because we wouldn't keep up with the rising cost of living, things were very challenging, especially in San Diego County. We experienced this firsthand when we saw housing prices increase and people simply could not afford to buy a home. Here's a chart showing our median sales price of a single family home in San Diego County. So at the height of the housing bubble at the end of 2007, the median price of a single family home was about $605,000 before the housing bubble burst and the Great Recession hit. At the end of 2020, the median price of a single family home in the county was $735,000. When we looked at the numbers recently, our team found that it went up to $835,000. If you look at over the past 20 years or so, last time we looked at the data, it was 2000 and the price was $279,000. So in 2018, when we looked at wages and the cost of housing, we found that less than 30% of families were able to afford a single family home in San Diego County. In 2020, that number is now closer to 10%. So let me repeat that. Nearly 10% of families in San Diego County can afford this incredibly high single family home. Despite this, despite the rising cost of living, we continue to see a slow growth in wages. So what happened during the pandemic, right? We had incredible employment growth, slow growth in wages, and now people are quitting. So what's going on? While the unemployment rate in San Diego County jumped to almost 16% in April, it's still in April of 2020, that unemployment rate has slowly declined over the past year. We are now at 5.3% unemployment rate as of the most recent report from EDD, or the Employment Development Department. For comparison, the last time that we had a very low unemployment rate was right before the pandemic hit, and we were at 3.3%, and this was in 2019. The number of job openings is at a record high. We have lower unemployment, and employers are trying to scramble to fill positions that lost workers during the pandemic due to layoffs or other attrition. Employers are now facing a tight labor market, and they have difficulty filling jobs. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported nationally there was a record high of 10 million job openings across the entire nation that employers weren't able to fill. There's a lot of competition out there for employers. You'll see probably in your local neighborhood or in your neighborhood, local employers posting up signs for retail shops, food service industry, now looking for workers at $15, $16, $18 an hour because they're competing for so much talent. Now it's become to the point where there's a war for talent among employers. To attract workers, the first thing employers did, as I mentioned, was just to throw money at the problem. We saw an increase in wages at Walmart. Amazon increased their wages. Various big companies are raising their minimum wages. They're raising it between $15 to $20 an hour. The federal minimum wage is at $7.25 an hour, so nearly twice that amount or even more. Even federal contracts are now raising their federal worker minimum wage to $15 an hour. However, just simply raising wages is not enough to attract workers. What employers are doing they're being creative, because if everybody's paying a higher rate, then they need a little bit more incentive to come back. Again, recalling the previous story that I mentioned, workers want to feel valued. They want to have flexibility. So some of the creative things that employers are doing, they're offering signing bonuses, and they're making job offers faster. So I don't know if any of you tried to apply for a job before the pandemic, but essentially when you applied for a job, you got an interview, you'd have to wait a couple of days or maybe even a week before an employer got back to you. Nowadays, employers have to make a job offer immediately. If they did not, then that individual or that candidate might have been picked up or swooped up by another company within the next day. For working parents, workers are now offering various childcare support as parents return to work after the pandemic. So some pilot programs are popping up. For example, in the United States, McDonald's are starting new pilot programs where they're adding emergency childcare to their benefits and also school and tuition benefits to attract more workers. Other companies offer up to $800 in childcare stipends for children up to the age 5. There was one company in NPR that reported that they were offering first-class tickets to anywhere in the world for workers who are signing up to work for their company and accepting the job offer. And that company is offering them $10,000 in expenses as they go on this around the world trip, or a trip wherever they wanted in around the world. So companies are really being creative as they're trying to attract workers. In short, companies are now finally investing in their employees. It's a bit poetic when you think about it, because prior to the pandemic, wages were really low, and we felt a lot of burnt out before the pandemic hit. And it's really about time that wages are creeping up now. It might be a little bit late, but we see the increase in wages and the market is correcting itself. And employers now have to adapt to this new labor market to thrive. They have to be, again, creative and invest and care about the employees. Otherwise, they won't get the workers that they need. Those that do not adapt to the new labor market will continue to struggle. Even in the restaurant industry, where margins are razor thin, employers have to be creative and offer career opportunities for workers now that everybody is competing for the same workforce, especially if they're a mom and pop shop or a small business. If you are a fan of podcasts, I highly recommend The Journal from the Washington Journal. So there was a podcast or an episode that came out recently that highlighted a story about creativity and how a mom and pop shop can actually answer this labor shortage that all employers are experiencing. So in this recent episode, the Journal highlighted a restaurant owner in New York City who increased wages up to $25 per hour. Again, this is a small restaurant, a fine restaurant, but a small restaurant, but they were able to increase their wages to $25 per hour. And they focused on creating an employee-centric culture. All the decisions they made was toward making sure that employees were satisfied at work. And it was, again, focusing on the employees and their needs. They reduced food costs by eliminating offerings or options on their menu. Basically, they made a smaller menu. To eliminate wage discrepancies, the company or the business eliminated tipping at the restaurant. And that seems to be unheard of because tipping is a staple in the restaurant industry. Instead of having tipping as a line item in the receipt, the owner basically rolled up tipping costs into our prices. She found research that explained that tipping is a racist and sexist system. Essentially, people tipped based on how servers looked and the color of their skin. So if you were a line cook or working in the back, waiters and servers would be making a lot more, and those that were more attractive would make a lot more as well. So she eliminated that altogether to avoid any kind of discrimination that might occur. She also changed the culture of her business so that her workers saw a long-term career instead of a short-term gig, which we normally associate with the restaurant industry. She put the workers first. She offered health insurance, extra paid sick days, extra time off. There was also a built-in system of promotions and wages. Everyone knew when to expect a review and when to expect a wage increase. The system was very transparent. After 3 months, there was a performance review and a wage increase. After 6 months, there was another performance review and a wage increase. So this transparency made the workers feel like working at this restaurant was more of a career than that short-term gig. Now, this restaurant is running at full capacity and they're making more money than before, while many other restaurants are struggling and short-staffed. The owner stated that she is inundated with resumes now. So owners like this or businesses like this that have been creative in trying to attract workers and making them feel valued, these stories are not uncommon. And these are the types of stories or companies that will survive. If they don't adapt and put people first, then workers will find other ways to find fulfillment in their lives. They'll also find other ways to build that fulfillment, that work-life balance. One way to do that is basically start their own company. So in the pandemic, we saw this surge of creativity and entrepreneurialism. One phenomenon that occurred is that there was a boom in the creation of new businesses. It was very strange for labor market researchers and economists to see this happen. Normally, when there's a recession, new businesses do not pop up. That's a very, very rare thing to happen when there's a financial crisis going on. But despite there being a financial crisis during this time, startups increased. There was a historic burst in entrepreneurship and self-employment last year. There was the accelerated creation of businesses across the United States. So in a recent report from the Peterson Institute for International Economics, they found that Americans started 4.4 million businesses in 2020. This was a 24% increase from the year before. It was the biggest increase of new businesses on record at the time. The most business creation appeared in retail and warehouse businesses, which may have resulted in the boom of e-commerce and online shopping during the pandemic. I know that I am one of many people who ordered goods online, including groceries, and looked into Etsy and so forth in order to purchase things. So a lot of these new businesses were around e-commerce activity. There was also a notable increase in healthcare startup companies, and I'm pretty sure we can assume why. With the pandemic going on, healthcare businesses also boomed. People were trying to be very creative in how they solved this challenge that our society was going through. Again, reflecting on before the pandemic, if you recall, there was actually not much business creation activity. So before the pandemic hit, there was a slump in new businesses. And a lot of economists and labor market researchers, like myself, we blamed big businesses. So many people were going after big businesses and their products and goods and services that smaller companies didn't really have an opportunity to grow. This graph here was created in 2017, and it showed that the share of younger companies were declining over the past couple of generations. It just kept on declining. We did not see a growth in new businesses. There was a lot of stories about Silicon Valley startups and how great these tech companies were growing. But when you look at the economy as a whole, startup companies, small new businesses really didn't pop up until recently. Now, hundreds of thousands of Americans left their jobs to become consultants, retailers, and small business owners. This increase in entrepreneurship reflects what we see in the labor market. People want more flexibility. They are anxious about COVID exposure or vaccine mandates, and they want something different than their pre-pandemic work life. Researchers noted that these startup companies typically fall again during recessions. When we had the Great Recession between 2007 and 2009, company growth declined, but this is one recession where startups actually grew. We can't say whether or not stimulus and maybe some of the extra income that came from the stimulus caused the new growth in these small businesses, but according to the data, there's too much of a correlation in the timing that when people got some extra disposable income, they were able to use that to pay for licenses or any kind of paperwork that they might need in order to start their own business. So even though we can't say that stimulus measures were the causation for growth in business, there's too much of a good coincidence, too much of a good timing that it's hard for us to just insist that is coincidence. When people had time to reflect at home, people had some disposable income and savings since they're not spending it on services, then folks decided, you know what, maybe I want to start my own business and start selling things that I find value in, start my own job, start my own company and have some flexibility. So in short, people just wanted quality jobs during this time, during the pandemic. They want a job that pays a living wage. Again, before the pandemic, we didn't have a lot of jobs that paid living wages and provided very good benefits. They want a company that values their employees. What more of a value can they get if it wasn't their own company and they value themselves for it? And they wanted a work environment that is flexible and understanding of life's challenges. So if you start your own company, you get to pick your own hours and you get to decide when to prioritize things that are important to you. You don't have an employer telling you that you have to show up at work if your little one is sick, for example. Now, employers are seeing this, and they're seeing the labor shortage due to people starting up their own businesses, due to people simply deciding not to work if they feel like they're mistreated. And now employers will try to do something for workers in order to bring them back to the workforce. So for individuals that don't want to start their own companies or may not have an interest in that, there are still plenty of industries out there with labor shortages and unfilled job openings. So let's take a look at some of these industry trends in the labor market and how they apply to San Diego. So I'd like for us to go through some of the industries that we should watch as we go through the pandemic and adjust to the new labor market. As a labor market researcher, I often get asked what industries and jobs are in demand. So most of my research is a snapshot in time. I can analyze what has happened and what is happening. This means that I cannot predict when a disruption will hit the labor market, such as a pandemic. So I personally do not like to make projections. I'm not an economist. I will not make projections on what I think will happen and what will cause industries and jobs to be more in demand than others. Well, while I say I don't like to make projections, I make an exception for healthcare and life sciences. So for healthcare and life sciences, these two sectors have proven to be recession resilient. After two financial crises, jobs in the healthcare sector continue to grow. So you'll see here that even in San Diego County between 2007 and 2009, and even after the Great Recession, jobs grew in health. They continue to grow and we project it to grow. In life sciences, the same thing. They continue to grow in San Diego County and the two are heavily connected to each other. Life sciences creates medical devices, pharmaceuticals for healthcare, and healthcare serves patients. So the two go hand in hand. Therefore, I don't see a trend line. I don't see this trend line declining while we have an aging and growing population because healthcare and life sciences jobs will continue to grow to meet that demand. But again, other than healthcare and life sciences, which have historically been proven to be recession resilient, I am not comfortable making projections about the labor market. But I can highlight some industries that have repeatedly gone through ups and downs and reported that they have difficulty finding qualified workers, especially during this time. So let's take at some other industries that aren't as stable and aren't as predictable, but are incredibly important during this time. The first sector that we're going to look at is energy, construction, and utilities. This sector has experienced quite a bit of ups and downs. When we were going through the Great Recession, 2007, 2009, when the housing market crashed and the world fell into this financial crisis, energy, construction, and utility jobs plummeted. They were in a decline. And so a lot of folks were laid off and people decided, you know what, I'm not going back to the energy, construction, and utility sector. But you might have guessed, during the pandemic, these jobs came back in huge waves. Everybody was staying at home and improving their work/living environment, even when material costs skyrocketed. There was so much demand for home improvement and landscaping services. Furniture sales also increased. When people had to stay inside for so many months, they wanted their environments to be a comfortable one and one they enjoyed. So people paid the extra dollar in order to improve their home or their living environment. Researchers at Harvard found that 2020 was a record-breaking year for home improvements. Last year alone, Americans spent nearly $420 billion on home improvement projects. San Diego County, when we looked at the employment numbers, construction and utilities were the only two industries that increased in employment, while all of the other industries faced job loss. So for comparison, accommodation and food services between February 2020 and June 2021, that industry lost over 30,000 workers. But during the same time, construction utilities, way down here, are the only industry sectors that grew, or excuse me, only industries that grew. With the new infrastructure bill that's coming out, with the new infrastructure bill, jobs in energy, construction, and utilities are expected to continue to grow. California specifically is expected to receive more in federal infrastructure funds than anywhere else over the next 8 years. This is a higher amount than any other state. These jobs have varying levels of educational requirements, from a high school diploma to a bachelor's degree. But the majority of these jobs, as you can see here that are coming out, will require less than a 4-year degree. We've had a labor shortage in energy, construction, and utilities for a while now. So in 2014, when I ran a research department over at the San Diego Workforce Partnership, we surveyed employers and asked them about key occupations in the sector and whether or not they had difficulty finding workers. They reported that solar water heat installers, HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning technicians, plumbers, electricians, other key occupations in energy, construction, utilities were very difficult to find. There was a labor shortage even then in 2014. So imagine now we're going to be in 2022 with people investing in their homes, that shortage has increased incredibly. Despite the fact that we have apprenticeship and non-apprenticeship programs for energy, construction, utilities across our community colleges. Here's just a few of the community colleges in our region that offer an apprenticeship program. Despite the fact that we have these programs available, not many youth ages 18 to 25 go into this industry. Most of the enrollments are from more mature workers who've been working for a while and then found out that this industry is lucrative, especially for people who are traditionally not represented in the sector, such as women. I can't count how many times employers in the sector have told me that they can't find enough women to fill their positions. And a lot of times, a lot of their projects require a diversification of their workforce. They need to have a good representation of both men and women, but women aren't applying for their positions. There's just not enough of them in the labor force as for energy, construction, and utilities. But they are willing to pay top dollar for women, again, for people who are traditionally not represented in energy, construction, and utilities. In terms of housing within this sector, we know that homelessness and affordable housing continues to be a problem in San Diego County and throughout the state of California. So in addition to having these building and trades apprenticeship programs or training programs in general, we also have, or we are going to be having a program, a non-credit program on property management, assessment management, and resident services in the affordable housing industry. Companies in the affordable housing industry, San Diego Housing Federation and ComEd, they reached out to us, the community colleges, to develop this program. They wanted to grow a program where residents who live in affordable housing units can go through the program, get the training, and be employed to manage property, manage resident services. And so this program is going to be offered as a non-credit program in the fall, or excuse me, at the end of 2022. So it'll be a free program for all students. Again, we have a lot of training programs out there that are meeting the needs of these growing industries, but it means that a lot of students have to apply for them for it to make a difference. Speaking of housing and purchases for the home that people made in the past year, this leads to another industry that we should watch, which is advanced manufacturing. So the advanced manufacturing sector has a very similar story to energy, construction, and utilities. During the Great Recession, manufacturing jobs declined and continued to decline until 2011. However, that industry bounced back and employment is now above pre-recession levels. So you see here, it dropped, but then it bounced back. How many of us shopped online on Amazon, Etsy, or any other consumer? Those products are made in a manufacturing firm, but there are not enough workers to help build those products. So I reported on this in 2014, when I still worked at the Workforce Partnership. I reported on other segments of manufacturing and how there was a demand for advanced manufacturing workers in 2015. And then I reported on it again in 2016 and again in 2018. I skipped 2017 because I switched jobs, but 2017 would have had a report as well. And then we had another report in 2019. In any case, you get the idea. Almost every year, every report that I've reported on, there was a demand for advanced manufacturing workers. Essentially, manufacturers had and continue to have challenges with recruiting workers. A lot of that has to do with the public perception of manufacturing, which still paints this sector as a dark, dirty, and dangerous profession. Our region has done a pretty good job at promoting manufacturing companies. There's something called Manufacturing Week that happens every year. And Monica and Heather are really good at getting K-12 and community college students to tour some of these manufacturing companies and having manufacturing workers come and present to students. But there is still a need, and this need will still grow as people spend more money on consumer goods. So the more money you spend on online shopping, the more this sector needs workers. And so I don't see that stopping anytime soon. And as manufacturers continue to struggle with staffing, companies will continue to struggle with supply chain challenges in general. Again, if you bought goods online, you probably experienced supply chain shortages directly. You experienced them for yourself. Shipments are delayed, products are sold out, but this affects all industries, not just consumer goods. So while we are directly affected, businesses are also directly affected. For example, the oil industry has supply chain issues, which affects gas prices. Healthcare has supply chain issues, which affects hospitals' ability to obtain medical devices and care for patients. This pandemic has really highlighted the need for quality workers in supply chain and logistics. Because of the importance of supply chain and logistics, my team released a report about our region's workforce needs for this industry last year. So our report was titled Logistics and Supply Chain Management Occupations. In a nutshell, supply chain and logistics includes the process of storing and delivering goods and raw materials. When your raw materials come from all over the world, managing logistics to obtain them in a timely manner is a tricky process. This process is exacerbated when there's a pandemic and ports are closed or shipping routes are delayed. So imagine trying to get your raw materials from one end of the country to another. Imagine if it's outsourced and bringing it from one country to another. If you try to do any international travel, you'll see that it's quite a process logistically. So in the report, we studied key occupations in the supply chain management and logistics industry. And we grouped these key occupations into 5 main categories. The first one is deliver. Second is make. 3 is source. 4 is plan. And the 5th one is return and store.
Tina, can I interrupt you? Sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
We have a question in the Whova. Someone is asking if you know who are the larger employers of manufactured goods in North, and then they said all of San Diego County.
Well, we have a list of example employers in our career ed guide, which I'll highlight a little bit in the end of my talk. But we do have a lot of resources that list the employers.
Thank you.
No problem. All right. So again, we looked at 5 different categories, and I'll go through each of them in detail. But whenever I talk about supply chain and logistics, people typically think of this category, these 2 categories, deliver and return and store. In the deliver category, you have cargo and freight agents and heavy truck drivers. These seem pretty familiar to all of us, especially when we see an Amazon truck coming by or something delivering goods to one place to another. For returning and storing, you have inventory clerks and warehouse managers. So people who manage all the products that come in and out of the warehouse and make sure that they keep track of everything. With millions of products out there in the market, they are highly in demand. The other category that most people probably don't think about is related to manufacturing, and it's that make category. We have production and manufacturing workers who are responsible for quality control. They essentially inspect, test, sort, and sample goods in production before the goods are shipped out. In addition to manufacturing and supply chain and logistics, we have a huge need for these inspectors, testers, sorters, samplers, and weighers in the life sciences sector. This is a typical occupation that we group them into. Medical devices and pharmaceuticals are produced through a manufacturing process. So in the life sciences, the employers, especially in our region, have been asking for workers in these positions for years. Again, looking at that chart that I shared earlier, it's been going on even before the Great Recession hit. For people who want to work in logistics and supply chain, but don't want to work maybe in the warehouse and they prefer working in business operations, these 2 categories, source and plan, might be a better fit for them. So in sourcing, you have buyers, purchasing agents, and procurement clerks. Essentially, you are procuring the goods needed in the logistics side, the supply chain. I used to be a buyer for a startup company, and I really enjoyed comparing prices and negotiating with vendors to get the best deal for our company. It required a lot of research and finding out what's out there, building relationships with vendors, and making sure that things arrived on time and that they were returned properly. So during the pandemic, if you really got a kick out of online shopping and comparing prices and getting the best deal for yourself, this might be a career that you'd look into. For the plan category, we have logisticians and supply chain specialists. I used to be an event planner, so a lot of skills to plan logistics for events are very similar to the skills that you would need to juggle logistics for a company. You need to negotiate with vendors, coordinate staff, plan out things when things will arrive, plan out when things will leave, and decide how to store things. There's, again, a lot of logistics involved. So if you're good at juggling a lot of those things, the plan category or being in logistics and supply chain specialists would probably be a good fit for you. So we looked at the jobs in our region for these 5 categories. And as you can probably imagine, the most jobs were in the deliver category. There was a huge need for truck drivers, a huge need for people to just get products in and out of the companies. But the jobs that are growing the most with the highest rate are in the plan category. So you'll see here, this yellow line. started right here and it moved all the way up here, especially right before the pandemic hit. I imagine now that number is a lot higher, but these positions include logistics and supply chain specialists. And the jobs that continued to grow steadily, as I mentioned earlier, are in manufacturing or in the make category. So these positions continue to be stable or growing as people need products and goods transferred from one place to another. The best part about this industry, about logistics and supply chain management, is that you don't always need a bachelor's degree to be qualified for the positions. We held an employer panel and asked them, for all of the occupations that I just mentioned, would somebody with a 2-year degree with some industry knowledge or certification or just any kind of experience be eligible for these positions? A lot of times the employers said yes. If they are able to do what's needed of those positions, they don't need a bachelor's degree for it. Some of our community colleges, after we've completed this report, have developed programs for the industry. We're continually doing research on what grows and continually adding programs to the community colleges to meet the needs of our employers. And the programs for this particular industry can be completed within 1 or 2 years. So for families or students who really want to get out there and start working, this is a really good path to get into. Today, I highlighted a few industries, sectors, and jobs, but if you're interested in learning more, as I mentioned, we have something called the Career Education Guide, which is located on myworkforceconnection.org. So if you go to myworkforceconnection.org, I believe our conference coordinators may have sent out the link as well, but you can find our Career Education Guide that we updated for this year. In it, there is an overview of what the sector is. This is the first one that shows up because it's in alphabetical order. What some of the fast facts are about the industry, what kind of occupations exist, including some of these titles by educational attainment, and then what are some of the wages that are here. So if you go there and you go to Career Ed, you can find a list of employers as well related to the industry. So careered.org, and again, you can download the guide at myworkforceconnection.org. If you are already familiar with our industry sectors and their jobs, you can visit our program finder, which is on programfinder.com. Hopefully, very simple to remember, programfinder.com. So I love this tool because when you go there, you can find programs related to the sectors across all of our community colleges in the region. You'll be able to look at different sectors or industries that are familiar to you, click on them, and then find programs in both the community college system and across high school districts. So when you go to programfinder.com, you'll hit this landing page. And again, you can click on any one of these industry sectors and it'll take you to a list of subsectors. I clicked on building and construction trades, and in it, it gave me this list of the program names. So if I scroll down and selected environmental control technology, which is basically heating, ventilation, air conditioning, HVAC, and I have it defaulted on colleges, I can see here on the left-hand side, all the colleges in our region that have a program related to HVAC and what the addresses are. Not only that, there's a map over here, so you can zoom in and see where they're offered in Southern California, essentially. If you click on the high school district portion, it should map a similar pathway, but on the high school side. So we try very hard to try to connect the two using these sectors and these industries. If you have any questions about the program finder or the career education guide, again, I highly recommend that you reach out to our conference coordinators. Heather and Monica are excellent at helping you find the resources that you need. So we hope that these tools will be helpful when you talk to your students about various careers and related programs. As educators and counselors, our role is to prepare students for the known and unknown opportunities out there. So we need to expose students to as many careers as possible and let them decide for themselves what's a good fit for them, because we will never know when and what the next economic shakeup will be. As I've shown with energy, construction, utilities, and manufacturing, industries and jobs constantly grow and decline. You can't really predict it, So let's train our students to become resilient and adaptable, especially when something as life-changing as a pandemic hits. So I would like for us to focus on resilient skills. These are skills that can be transferred from one career to the next. There are a lot of names for these skills. My Labor Market Research Center did an entire report on this topic. And this is what it looks like. We called it 21st century employability skills, but again, there are a lot of names for them. They are considered soft skills, foundational skills, non-cognitive skills, and so on. The literature has a lot of names for these skills. No matter what they're called, I'm sure you know what they are. And they were displayed during the pandemic. As I mentioned, there was a surge in startups. And this, in my opinion, is how we can learn and also how we can develop some of these soft skills or 21st century employability skills. People saw a problem, they saw a market, and then they were creative in trying to solve that problem, especially during a time when things are restricted. It was during a pandemic. So creativity and problem solving, in education, we call these entrepreneurial skills. They're very similar. People who have skills in business operations were the ones that were able to transition to remote work during the pandemic. A lot of people also asked me during this time, which occupations can we train our students for? Well, let's look at the ones that grew and the ones that were able to work remotely that we can add on to a lot of our industry skills from all of those programs that I mentioned earlier. So this is basically a hybrid, right? A hybrid of those industry specific skills and these entrepreneurial skills or these creativity and problem solving skills. So again, we basically asked employers, we surveyed them earlier this year and asked, what jobs or positions did you transfer over to remote work at least 25% of the time since March 2020 when the stay-at-home order hit? The employers told us that the top 5 positions were in executive, marketing, operations, customer service, and finance roles. So a lot of these skills, again, can be some of those entrepreneurial skills. When we looked at the top online job postings, we found that these responses really correlated with what people are posting online. So in terms of resilient jobs or jobs that were constantly posted and people were looking for over and over again, they included general and operations managers, salespeople, accounting clerks, human resource specialists, administrative workers, and so forth. So again, a lot of business operation skills. So when we looked not only at what people were posting, employers were posting in online job postings, we also looked at what workers were posting in their online resumes. Online resumes are basically professional profiles, things that you put on LinkedIn.com or Monster.com. And no matter what their degree was, whether it was in language, philosophy, the social sciences, business, communications, engineering, or information technology, whether you were in the humanities or in the sciences, the top 10 careers that people had in common across all of those degrees were in sales, marketing, management, and business and financial analysis. So again, on top of getting industry-specific training, let's supplement some of our students' careers with some of these skill sets. They need to be able to do a little bit of sales. Sales is basically advocating for yourself, communicating how you can transfer one skill to another. I shared an example with you all today. I described that I was an event planner. So if I wanted to go into logistics and supply chain management, I would tell the employers how well I did in terms of navigating logistics when it comes to event planning, how I dealt under stress when everything came all at once or when products did not arrive when they needed to be there. So being able to have that sales, communicating, advocating on yourself, knowing how to market your services, market yourself, knowing how to manage any kind of business operations, those are key skills that all of us should have a little bit of training in, or at least a little bit of knowledge in. The profiles not only listed these main careers, they also listed industry-specific certifications and licenses. So again, I'm going to repeat that not only should we just focus on these skill sets, we also want to focus on some of the industry-specific knowledge as well. And you can get some of that through certifications and licenses. These are things that got workers through the door, especially if they've never been employed in that sector or industry before. So in response to certifications and licenses, my team is releasing a certifications and licenses report next year. Our wonderful research analyst, Priscilla, is working on that, and it should be published and released in January of 2020. But again, I'll give you an idea of the types of industry certifications that will help some of our students get employed. All right, so that was a lot. Those were all the jobs, what happened during the pandemic, the types of skills that we saw were able to stand the test of time. So I'd like for us to go into our wrap-up reflection for today, and then we can go into some of the questions. So to wrap up our reflection, let's reflect on the industries that had difficulty finding workers. Let's reflect on what our students are interested in. Remember that story I mentioned earlier about individuals really realizing what was important to them and what they wanted to prioritize. What is important to our students? What do our students have a passion for? Let's help them prepare for those passions and those growing industries and jobs. Let's help them get industry certifications, but we also want to help them build skills and advocate about the skills that they currently have that can be transferred to one job to the next, no matter what happens in the labor market. Students, again, need to be able to communicate and advocate for themselves in a time like this, when there are so many different challenges and stresses that companies have. The only person that can really advocate and know what you've done in the past is yourself. So let's provide them with the skills to do that. I thank you all for joining me on our reflection today. And I hope that this presentation or this talk was helpful for you, and that you got some ideas of how you can share what's going on in the labor market with your students. And I see a hand raised, so take it away.
Thank you, Tina, so much. That was wonderful. There is one question for you before we close. They are asking, and I want to say, okay, Joyce Almario is asking, going back to manufacturing, the reality is that it's expensive to do business in California. I think people may fear manufacturing jobs because they worry companies will relocate to more affordable states. Is this a concern? Is it a trend?
I would say that again, as a labor market researcher, I analyze what happened before and what's happening now. So in the past, yes, that was a huge concern because we heard a lot about outsourcing. That was in the headlines all the time, where companies are outsourcing their goods, materials, manufacturing processes overseas. And then the pandemic hit. Even before that, people's labor skills overseas were increasing in costs. So a lot of companies started to do something called onshoring or reshoring. So they brought back a lot of those manufacturing jobs to the US. It cut costs of trying to manage the logistics overseas, and it cut costs just overall from outsourcing. Now with the pandemic and the difficulty that employers have in getting these goods and raw materials over ships, planes, etc., a lot of that production you'll see in California, in the United States. We see a lot of stories of industries looking locally to find raw materials and goods to support the demand of their consumers in the US. So I would say, yes, it was a concern. It may still be a concern, but based on what we've seen in the industry, it's becoming less and less of a concern now. I will also say that just developing skills in manufacturing is one that you can use in the future. So I've heard a lot of folks that work in manufacturing that say, I knew how to source materials to build something. So when I started my own company and wanted to prototype things, I was able to find vendors to help me put together or manufacture that proof of concept. So it all ties together. And I see the concern about it, but at the same time, with so much growth in manufacturing and such a labor shortage, I highly recommend folks think a little bit differently about the sector.
Thank you so much, Tina. I hope that answers your question. Oh, sorry, I forgot who asked it. I'll say it right now. Joyce. Yeah. Thank you, Tina. And I think we're done with questions. Go ahead, Heather.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tina. Wow, what a great presentation. That was a lot of useful information. Thank you, Tina. We're so happy to partner with Centers of Excellence, and your team is always on it with so much valuable information for our region. So we appreciate so much your presentation today. What an incredible shift in that this pandemic has caused in our workforce. So interesting to hear what you shared with us today. So thank you so much. So here we are at the end of the keynote, our day one keynote. Thank you again, Tina, and thank you to those who have stayed on to enjoy Tina's presentation. We're now going to take just about a 30-minute break, a pause. Don't forget to check out those career education videos in the exhibitor section if you have some time. Get yourself a fresh cup of coffee, enjoy some of those videos, and then we'll have session 1 beginning at 10:30 this morning. And don't forget after that, after you go into one of those breakouts, to click rate that breakout after each breakout. So session 1 will start at 10:30. We'll have another 30-minute pause, and then session 2 begins at 12 o'clock, and then that'll wrap up today. So thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you all back here tomorrow morning for our second keynote speaker at 9 a.m. Enjoy the day.